Brilliant. So thank you all very much for persisting through to the end. One thing I didn't say earlier, I'm Liz Ferguson, I work for Wiley. It's my distinct pleasure to be a part of the organising committee for this conference, and I have to say this is the most pleasurable of my extracurricular tasks. It's a great team of people to work with and it's a lot of fun. One thing that is not in common with many other publishing meetings is that there's never an overarching theme to COASP, but they tend to emerge really quite quickly as we start to work through the talks and the days once we're here in person. So I'm going to start by reflecting a bit on Caroline's opening remarks. She said that despite this being a publisher meeting, it's obviously open to everybody, and it's great that this year, in common with many other years, we've got representatives here from institutions, from a funder, I think, hopefully more next time around, researchers and many other groups besides publishers themselves, because gathering together is really the best way that we're going to enable change to happen, and collaboration was one of the very first themes that came through and kept popping up repeatedly through the last 2 days. So examples of that were Louise Page talking about the need for common action around standards so that we can improve the flow of research communications right the way through the process. Mark Patterson, doing a very effective job of channeling Paul Shannon, told us about multiple new collaborations underway at eLife that aren't just going to improve what eLife is offering, but can also be adopted and amended so that they can benefit others who choose to follow similar paths. Jonas Gernal presented commonalities in the way that the Nordic countries are looking at mechanisms to support research evaluation, and again, those lend themselves to subtle variability and changes between countries to suit their own individual needs. Jessica this morning told us about how ASAP Bio convened very early on in its existence, a meeting that brought together funders, publishers, and researchers to talk about how best to drive the kind of changes in behavior we need to see to make preprints a much more consistent and common behavior across the life sciences. There's a great deal of diversity, for possibly want of a better expression, in the scholarly communication system, and there's a great deal of benefit to be had from coming together and choosing to implement, where we can, common infrastructures to drive greater efficiency and much better speed and all-round resource efficiency for everybody involved. So the second key theme that I picked up on came up first early on in Jean-Claude Bergelmann's talk, where he said that change is unstoppable. And we've heard a lot about change again in the past couple of days. Today, this afternoon, Paul Peters described how that is not yet universally beneficial, and there's real challenges for fully open access publishers trying to compete in an environment in which actually a lot of the recent developments may seem to or may actually be preserving the status quo and restricting some of the original goals of OASPA and those involved with it to create a much more functional market. The pace of change can also be frustratingly slow in other areas. We heard about the challenges of implementing open peer review in books publishing, for example. But much more encouragingly, there's been a consistent theme throughout this of multiple pilots and projects and experiments, great new startups and ideas emerging through the lightning talks and the poster presentations. And Francis Pinter was telling us about how while there isn't real evidence to support the drive in open access books publishing, equally there is absolutely nothing to hold anyone back from doing so. Liz Allen talked about how a lack of evidence around open peer review shouldn't be mistaken for a lack of the need to change and start moving forward in that direction. Vanessa Proudman encouraged us all to let's just do it and start focusing on projects that achieve consensus and can be delivered on very easily and quickly. And a personal highlight for me actually was Jean-Sébastien Coe's talk, which gave us, not only was it a great and entertaining talk, but it gave us a really terrific example of how researchers are dealing directly with the frustrations they're feeling in the current system and coming up with the change themselves and changes that are getting real traction. Oh, and bananas. We did have bananas as well. And talking about bananas, someone mentioned Brexit, but it's kind of inevitable. Finally, I think I can probably say in this room without any controversy that the changes that we're all seeking are underpinned by fundamental need for change in research assessment and evaluation. Robert's talked about that at quite some length today. Danny did a great talk about it earlier this morning for us. Martin Quack's talk, I thought, again, was another terrific and entertaining one, and another great example why it's really beneficial for us as publishers to have researchers in the room when we meet. And he gave us some really good examples of how proper all-round investigation of the scientific contribution people are making is much better suited to science than anything purely numerical. Danny gave us some really good examples of where change is beginning to happen, but it still feels very piecemeal and institution by institution. And she's clearly identified that those who are often in a position to make the changes that we all want to see are reluctant to do so or don't yet see the reason to do so. But as John Claude Bergelman again said, 10 years ago, nobody would have expected OA to be so mandatory as it is now. And it is now for many, and that's because of funder intervention. I thought a lot of what Robert's just talked about and the thinking that Wellcome's doing is really encouraging. Funder platforms have bookended this meeting and I think could be a source of radical change in research communication overall. But even if it isn't, I think funders are the people who are best positioned to drive the change in assessment and evaluation that will go on to drive the kind of changes that we all need to see, and to meet Jessica's challenge of trying to bring much closer together mechanisms of research evaluation and the dissemination of all research products so that they're conducive to good, productive, open behaviors. So, to not keep you from the lovely delights of Lisbon for much longer, I've just got a very few final words of thanks. First of all, to the wonderful sponsors here who've kept us all very well fed and watered over the past couple of days. Definitely again to my colleagues on the organising committee. It's been great to work with you all again. To all of the speakers who've joined us for the past couple of days, and to everyone in the audience who's contributed by asking questions, having such vibrant conversations in the social times and around the posters and so on. And very particularly to Layla and Claire, who've put in a huge amount of work to making this meeting such a success. So thank you all very much. Hope to see you next year. Done.